Hello, friends! This is another episode of the program Empire of Lies, in which we discuss manipulation and disinformation in the Russian media. The rhetoric of war, why the language of retribution leads to a dead end. The Russian public sphere is increasingly dominated by unbridled language. In Solovyov's program, this rhetoric makes no distinction between military and civilian targets, between defense and retaliation. It's built on the idea that if the enemy strikes border regions, the response should not be targeted, but total, destroying cities, wiping them off the face of the earth, so that the enemy learns to fear. This language is designed for emotional effect. It mobilizes the audience, creating the illusion of strength and resolve. But behind the outward harshness lies a dangerous substitution of concepts. The strategic logic of war gives way to the logic of rage. War with Europe and the US, as anew, the main tactic is to expand the conflict front to the limit. This isn't just a clash with Ukraine, but a war against NATO and the entire West. Within this framework, any action, arms supplies, diplomatic support, even political statements, is declared acts of outright hostility. This simplification is convenient, but dangerous. If the entire collective West becomes the enemy, then any incident in the air, at sea, or in cyberspace becomes a pretext for escalation. The logic of everyone is against us blurs the lines between a local conflict and a world war. The Secretary of Defense, well, he's a handsome fellow, he comes off like dandy. Just don't go near the skateboard. We showed him yesterday with the skateboard. On the other hand, he's got a lot to do. He's got a lot to do. Well, that's how he talks, a pure porn actor. If he's going to make it, he's got a lot to do. I mean that in a good way. I'm going to insult him. He's a stylish guy. But sometimes I get the impression that before they make another announcement, they find Hunter Biden's stash somewhere in the White House. You see? How does this all connect with what happened yesterday and what's happening today? You see? Well, Trump is a very experienced politician, a wise man. What's this today? I have 2 submarines somewhere off Russia. We have them off America, I think. Not even 2 or 4. Well, no one's shouting about it. So why all this scaremongering? This is, in my opinion, a cheap game played by Vitkov and Kellogg as a good and evil politician. The logic of retaliation, strike the capital. The second proposition is the idea of intimidation. It is based on the proposal to strike major cities and command centers, Kyiv, Kharkiv, and government districts. The argument goes like this. If you strike us, we will do the same, only stronger and more terrifying. The history of the 20th century shows that such actions do not bring peace. The bombing of London didn't break Britain. The strikes on Hanoi didn't stop Vietnam. And the carpet attacks on Dresden or Tokyo didn't hasten capitulation, but only increased the cost of war. Civilian casualties cement the will to resist and close off any possibility of compromise. Blackmail with global threats. The third motive is everyone has vulnerabilities. If Ukraine acquires long-range missiles, Moscow claims, other regions of the world could respond in kind. The Houthis in Yemen with Caliber missiles, Iran with an accelerated nuclear program, and North Korea with its own strikes. At first glance, this is the logic of deterrence, but in reality it turns into global blackmail. Any arms transfer is interpreted as a pretext for going beyond the conflict. The more vocal this rhetoric, the higher the likelihood that someone will actually decide to test the red lines. And then the consequences will become impossible to manage. The economics of war and elite interests. A separate section is devoted to accusations against Europe and the United States. The war is presented as a business project of Western elites, budgets, embezzlement, and military-industrial complex contracts. The argument is simple. The West is supposedly interested in continuing the fighting because it allows it to write off funds and maintain power. This narrative shifts responsibility for the war to an external adversary, while simultaneously nullifying any discussion of its own decisions. But the reality is more complex. A protracted conflict destroys the economies of all sides, widens budget gaps, and fuels social discontent. Substituting conspiracy for analysis turns war into an eternal source of benefits, and thus eliminates the very possibility of ending it, dismantling negotiations and norms. Against such statements, diplomacy appears a fiction. Any negotiations are called self-deception, compromise is weakness, and international law is an obstacle. Instead of a political solution, a simple formula is proposed: demolish and then rebuild. This logic destroys not only cities, but also the system of international constraints. If humanitarian law is declared unnecessary, if civilians are perceived as collective accomplices, then the very idea of post-war coexistence disappears. All that remains is endless war. This was the Empire of Lies program. See you soon.